Right, I don't think everybody saw the pictures of what this organ looks like when it's finished. I don't think it's going to be white. That's got to be researched as to what colour it was manufactured. If it was French polished, it will go out French polished. If it was painted green, it will be painted green. We'll see what it was under that paint. But what I want to discuss is we've actually got the soundboard here. I pulled it out of storage and unfortunately it's got mouse damage, which I wasn't expecting. So soundboard is what the pipes live on. So you've got the building frame in front of me there. We've got a wonky picture as well. Let's just correct that with the tripod. Just widen out. So on top of the building frame, if I put my finger right at the top there, goes the soundboard. You've got one for the top keyboard. It's a 2 keyboard organ, so it's called 2 manual in organ parlance. And then you've got the bottom keyboard. And so that soundboard is at the front. The soundboard is also known as a wind chest, and it's what the pipes live on. It's what's in front of me. So just to show you the picture of when this was removed. What you have, let's just kind of go in a bit closer. So you've got this building frame. The bottom keyboard soundboard is on top of the building frame there, and the one we're working on is the Swell soundboard. It's called the Swell. That's the top keyboard one, is there. Those are the things that activate the stops, which I'll show you. So the top of the soundboard, here's 2 pictures. You'll see on this when I move it around, you've got is the tabletop. And it has a hole corresponding to each of the, I think it's 56 notes on this, not 61. Standards have changed over the years, and this is 1865, and a view of the other direction. The reason these photos were taken is these conveyances go to the side. I needed to know where they fitted for future reference, so that's why that was taken. So we have the tabletop, we have the slides. There are wooden slides with holes in them that correspond with the holes in the soundboard, which correspond with the holes in the upper board. So the slides move in and out, and therefore they stop off a rank of pipes from sounding. Hence it's called a stop. Until the 1400s, they didn't have stops, and so however many pipes you had all played at once for each note. So that's the tabletop. Now, I'm going to move the camera. So we're upside down at the moment, and these you can see what's known as the bars. So each of the 56 notes has a bar, and this fills with air when the palate, which is an air valve, is open. I'll show you those. This is covered in calico, so that's glued down with the usual animal glue that we use. Sometimes it's covered in thick paper. Sometimes it's covered in that rubberized cloth called tosh, and that's where the phrase "a load of old tosh" comes from, when it's when the rubber has perished. So we would use calico, and I've actually ordered some. So what you're seeing is the result of mice having eaten away the calico, because that's glued on with that animal glue, and that's tasty to mice. And so I was quite shocked, because I thought we were going to just pull this out of storage, put it up on the building frame, clean the pallets and get on with the organ. But not so, because the mice have taken a fancy to it. So you'll notice that these bars at this end and at the far end are smaller than the ones in the middle. And this organ's manufactured so the biggest notes are in the centre. Now usually organs are every other for the first octave or so, perhaps octave and a half. So it'll go C, C sharp, D, D sharp, but the centre is C. It's traditional that when it's in sides, the left-hand side, which is called the bass side, is going to be the C side, and the right-hand side will be the C sharp side. That is convention. So we've taken all the screws out. There were some swines to get out. We've got them all out successfully. Nothing's broken. Bearing in mind how this is 1865, and it was in a very, very damp building, which is why the organ had to come out. Of course, the building should have been repaired, as it will have done. I'll correct that. The building needed repairing, and the organ should have gone back in, but they chose not to go down that avenue. So I'm going to move the camera again, bearing in mind this is upside down. So what you can see here are the pallets. These are the pull downs. So the mechanical action, when you press a note by a series of rods and levers, these are opened, these are spring return. I say, once again, remember this is upside down. So the pipes are sitting under and either the way on. So these are the pallets, the spring returned. They are a leather which is glued to felt, which is glued to the wood of the pallet. It's shaped in such a way that they're able to pull through, because this is in compressed air. I've got the faceboard off, as it's called. So you've got the compressed air, which is 3.5 water gauge on this organ, I expect. And so it is. If you don't have these shaped properly, you have surface tension, and when you play the organ, it makes it very, very hard to play. Now, our Konica organ, the finished one, is very difficult to play. It's very heavy action, would not suit beginner. But I think this will be better balanced. So there you go. So these are bushed so that the copper wires that go from the trackers, which is what they're called, the wooden rods are called trackers. What a tracker will pull, and when something pushes and it's a wooden rod, it's called a sticker. So that's a tracker is going to pull on that. At the far end, if I just move the camera around, you'll see there's some stubs sticking out there. Just see if we can zoom in. And that's because in taking the organ out, some of the trackers broke. So we have to make new ones, and they're made out of beech. Mahogany will do as a second best. Now, what we've observed, I'll move the camera. In fact, I think I'll put this on its side. So I'm going to take those screws out, and we'll put the thing on its side. So what I've done is to move it actually into its proper way up. I was going to put it on its side, but I thought, no, we'll show you this. So you've got all these holes which correspond to the 56 notes. So on this, so you've got your there's 4 different ranks of pipes. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's going to be the back of the swell box, the back of the organ. This is going to be the front. The biggest parts will be at the back, and they'll come down because when you tune an organ, you can't be having huge pipes obscuring the smaller parts, so you wouldn't be able to get to them to tune. It's interesting to note that on the back rank, if I can poke my finger on that back rank, you'll notice 12 of those holes are blank. On the front rank, 12 of the holes are blank. Now this organ has a 16-foot board on in the swell. You won't be able to get the 16-foot pipes in the swell, so it stops at Tennessee, it stops an octave short. Now there may be a mechanism that plays the notes and nicks them off the pedals. That sometimes happens, but I've no idea, because although this organ came out playing in inverted commas, it wasn't perfect, even though it was overhauled in 85. There was a lot of damp problems. And the front rank is going to be an oboe. So it's the only reed on the organ, and that's going to stop at Tennessee as well. So remember this, the age of this, a lot of organs were Tennessee swells. And this is a slight departure that it does actually have on 2 ranks. One of them is going to be 4-foot pitch. We'll talk about that in the future, what 4-foot and 8-foot pitch is, but 8-foot is the same note, middle C, as what it would be on a piano, middle C. 4-foot's an octave higher, 16-foot is an octave lower. So now we're going to look at the front, if I jack down the tripod. So what I've done is to prop up on an angle so that we can actually see right in the works. And what you'll see is the front of the pallets. Let's just see if we can zoom in. They're all labelled when it was manufactured in 1865. Let's see if we can pull down on a pull down. So you've got the pallet there, as it's called, which is the air valve. So when that opens, it lets wind, as we call the air, into the bar. So it's like a bus bar. and I say the slides will select what stops will play, and that bar is what is exposed at the back, and instead of the calico being there, it's been eaten away by mice. And so I have ordered calico. I'm not doing, I think it was done with cardboard on this organ, but our Konica certainly was. But we're going to clean these pallets, and that's done with something called a pallet brush, which is a thin piece of wood with a piece of sandpaper glued to it. So when I started my apprenticeship and Mr. Groves, my boss, said, I want my pallet brush, I was looking for something like a paintbrush, but there you are. I've taken out the pallet to guard. There's a piece of timber sits in a groove at the end there, and at the corresponding groove at the other end, and it stops these pallets from coming down too far. So it will stop them about there. So if something like a hymn book dropped on the keys and it bounced it, what it won't do is to rip the pallet off at the back, because it's hinged on its leather. Now, hopefully there's enough light in here for you to see, but we kind of get this camera in such a way that I can see through the viewfinder some of the springs. You will see there are some springs in there, and on this organ they're brass. Now my training is as if they're brass springs, they will be losing tension, change them for steel ones. But you know what, I'm not going to at this stage. It can be changed later. I'm not just worrying about the cost, it's all the time in doing it, because all these springs have got to come out anyway. It's a bit of a faff to reset them all to the same strength, because they're going to differ from note to note. And if it ain't broke, don't fix it kind of thing. If we were sending this out as a job to a church, we would be putting on a 25-year warranty, so I have to be confident these are going to not play up in the next 25 years. But the other thing is the other issue is the pull downs you'll see are these wires. I'll just get my fingers in such a way that we can actually see it on a camera. It's that, there we are. These wires, I think they're steel on this, and it should be phosphor bronze because they rust. Now I wouldn't change them, but for the fact we've got to take them all out, because between the pallets you will see there are pins. You see there's a guide pin to the left, and you can see the top of a guide pin. Let's just move the camera around perhaps to there. You'll see between the pallets we've got these guide pins. They're steel, and right at the bottom a lot of these are corroded, so they need to come out and be replaced with phosphor bronze, because that is going to play up. Because if they snap off, what can happen is the pallet can go sideways. So there we are, that's the innards. And the other interesting thing, leaning up, I'll just pause the camera. Written on the inside of the faceboard, not unusually, Chris Hind and Ted Astrup did the last overhaul in 1884. He's not that old, he's still going very much so. 1984, and that's always a little insight. And if I move that along, it says, don't know whether that's clear enough with the way the angles are, but that one says cleaned and moved. F. Renshaw and somebody else, January 1920. And when we look at the National Pipe Organ Register, it says Forster Andrews organ from Louth Congregational Chapel, installed here when the congregation merged, and the previous information was 1919. So that's true. They did it 1920, so the organ got moved then. So the fact it was 1917 isn't really correct. It's 19. I remembered it wrongly. I've been saying 1913 when it was moved, but it was 19. It says 1917, but in fact it was 1919/1920. Then at the end we have another little message. Langman and Rumble 1906. So have we got anything on a 1906 thing on the National Pipe Organ Register? And the answer is no. But it did get moved previously, so they could be the people who moved it and overhauled it in 1906, because it went from one chapel to another. Then the chapel merged, we found out, in 1919, so the organ got shifted in 1920. So then it's been in that chapel since, when did we buy? About 2010. So yeah, been a long time in that building. So we're going to battle on with this. We'll look for splits on the top of the soundboard, and sometimes the timber can split and you can end up with the notes running. You play one note and it runs to another. This hasn't happened on this organ. It's when they get baked in a hospital chapel, when the organ gets absolutely baked and you get split soundboards. I remember doing an overhaul at Walkley, Sheffield, on the Brindley and Forster metacotic pneumatic thing, and that had runnings within its pneumatic action, and the gap was so great we actually had to put rope into the gap. So that was an interesting organ. So we're going to battle on with this. I'm going to order new pull downs. We're going to order phosphor bronze wire to cut and make these pins out of, and these pull downs have bushings in, so that if I can just get that on camera, they have a bushing. There's one with a bit of a tracker left in it, so that the copper wire isn't going to rattle when the notes are played. So the new ones will have built-in bushings, which are nylon these days, and the bushings also in the pallet. They should be okay, but we can replace them if any fall out. So that's where we are, and so we're going to overhaul this, and as we take it apart, I'll come back to camera. A few hours later on in the same day, we've got this dismantled, so you'll see, leaning up against the wall there, we've got the bottom board, and then we've got the spring board in front of that, which the springs from the pallets fit into. Just move the camera around. I've put all the springs into a piece of wood I drilled holes in, so they're all in the same order, because they're going to be slightly different strengths, and that's something we don't have to mess with if we put them all back in the same sequence. So of course this is upside down. You previously saw the back bit, and now you can see the innards. So these are the pallets, remember. So as these open, pull downs pull on them, and they let air into the bar that runs for each note. I've taken most of these pins out, and 3 have come out of about 60 in one piece. The rest are broken off. So we're going to have to put new phosphor bronze ones in, but in a slightly different location, which will be fine, no problem. I don't think these are the original leather palleting, whatever you'd say, because it does look like it's been redone at some time. And we're going to have to evaluate when Mr. Chippy comes in here. I'll ask him what he thinks. So we've taken the heel piece out. There's a heel board goes in, the whole length. In fact, that's leaning up there on the right. That's the piece of like inch square, but it is shaped. So, disaster, because the mice have eaten the leather or the calico or whatever it is on the inside as well, and these look pretty precarious. I think we're going to have to take all the pallets off. Certainly the upper notes, these notes, the lower notes don't look quite as affected. We'll see. So it's a matter of, can we actually remove these without repalleting them? And if we do have to repallet them, obviously it's another couple of hundred pounds of leather and felt, and it's unnecessary because it hasn't got the normal problem, which when you normally have to repallet a soundboard, it's because it's had ingress of water from like the roof leaking or something like that, and this hasn't happened in this case. And you know, to think I thought this was going to come straight out of storage and we're just going to plonk it on that building frame and connect it up after cleaning the pallets. So there you are, that's where we are at the moment. So we're going to have to look into whether we've got to take these off or not. So roll on the next day, and what I decided to do was to remove those 3 pallets which are the worst affected. Now, something on this organ that I've not seen previously, normally where the pallets end there, that normally is filled in with timber. But it isn't on this organ, and I did see it on the pedal chest of our Konica, and Mr. Chippy filled it in. So it looks like they intend you to actually put leather across the bars. So I took these 3 pallets off because I could see mouse nibblings of the actual pallet leather, and there you can see where it's being glued down at the heel or the hinge end. We're going to try and keep the upper hinges. It saves a bit of bother, and as you can see it's felt and leather which is glued onto the wooden pallet. There's 56 of them, one for each note. So what I've done is to cut the felt and leather. So there we have the felt. Here we have the leather. This is luckily something I've got in stock, because I've only got enough for this soundboard. I think we're going to have to make these over 2 days, because it's going to be 24 hours drying. So that needs to be rough side down. And so we glue these 2 together, and that gives us the hinge as a bit of latitude to cut off as well. So what I now need to do is to score the leather on this side, because this is the shiny side and it may not adhere, so it's standard practice to score that. So I'll go and get a hacksaw blade. So if the battery holds out, that's now got my late aunt's perfume talcum powder on it, to just in case any glue gets on there and sticks. Oh, just about the right size. And then that will, as I say, go on top. I'm going to go and get the glue pot, and we'll just see whether we can. It has to be worked very quickly. This really needs doing within 30 seconds. Not something you want to do on a cold day or in an unheated building. Temperature in here is about 17 centigrade at the moment. Last thing you want is this delaminating. You can always heat it up at the end slightly with the kind of iron you do your clothes with. Right, we'll get that put back, and then we're going to weight it down. There's a piece of chipboard left over from when the floor was done, and I'm going to go outside and get a bellows weight and put that on. There we go. So we'll come back to that. We've got other things to do. I've got the pallets to take off, so that's something we'll try and do over the course of the day. and I don't see any reason why we can't glue the pallets onto that this evening. So I think we'll be doing this just coming up to 9 o'clock. So I think we'll start gluing pallets on at 9 o'clock this evening. So as I'm waiting for the steamer to heat up again, as you can see, I've taken the pallets off and we've cleared all the material, shall we say, behind the hinges, tails of the pallets. As you can see on the left-hand third of the soundboard, and the rest is still to be removed. I've not seen them done like this before, but there you go. So I've also been taking the felt and leather off, which is now on a pile on the floor. And on here, as you can see, we've got these pallets which I've taken I've got to steam the last lot off, the last bit of that residue off. So if you look at this, we're now down to that. We'll just sand that over. I don't need to remove everything, just need to remove bits of stray stuff so it doesn't cause it to be a lump. So what we're starting off with is that I've removed the felt and leather, but the felt's still a bit stuck, and that's why we're just steaming that off and scraping it. So about a third of the way through those. Tomorrow morning, it's now 6:30. We did that felt and leather at 9 o'clock. Tomorrow I think we'll get on with sticking these pallets down onto that new felt and leather. Everything's got to dry, hasn't it? This is the problem, you know, you can't say I want it now. So just to show all the steady pins which are rusted were removed, all but 3 broke off. So we're making new ones out of phosphor bronze. I'll probably show doing that. And then we've got rid of the leather at the back of the pallets. We'll put that flat and I'll just go over it lightly with sandpaper just to make sure there's no ridges or anything like that, because it can be where the hinges have been at the back for donkey's years. So that's done. We've been gluing down the pallets on that felt and leather I made. So there we are, all glued down onto that felt and leather which I laminated the other day. And we'll put another bellows weight on there. And I'll tell you what else we'll do. We'll borrow the company spirit level. Just where those heels are. Couple of power tool batteries. There we go, and that can stay 24 hours. So we managed to get 36 pallets out of the 56. So I'll need to make up some more felt and leather. We'll need to stick the other 20 down to it. Then these are simply separated by cutting with a sharp knife. And we'll next show you from there. So what's happening here is Mr. C is just using a Dremel type of tool just to cut the rusted away bits of steady pins before we put new ones in a nearby position. I'm going to go over that with an orbital sander, but we just don't want the pallets to get caught on that. So that's this side of it. The pallets which I've glued down onto the felt and leather are now on the bellows, drying overnight. Meanwhile, we've got another felt and leather which is being made up. What I'm about to make is new pins to replace the ones we've had to remove and which Mr. C is dremeling away. So meanwhile on here we've got these pallets which have now had the felt totally removed and they've been sanded, ready for the new felt and leather. Meanwhile I've made up this little jig here. So I'll explain why and all that. So when you've got a lot to make, and how much we've got something like 60 to make, I could have done with I'll have to bring a box across to put them in. That's aside. So we know the length because I managed to extract 3 without them breaking. So the quickest thing to do is to make a jig, so you can just do them all the same size rapidly. So that fits between that piece of wood and that end. So we have in stock, although I've reordered because that's the wrong one. Where did I put that? Ah, here. So we have some lengths of phosphor bronze wire here, which is 16 SWG, standard wire gauge. And that is exactly, I checked it with a micrometer, and it's exactly the same. The phosphor bronze, so self-lubricating, doesn't rust. Let's pull one of these lengths off. And all we need to do is simply put that against the jig and cut it off. I'll just do a few. Do a complete length. There we go. So they're all the same length, and we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 out of one length. So I'm going to go in the workshop next door, and with the with the bench grinder, just going to put a bit of a point on. Then you'll see how they're fitted later on in the video. So we're just going to make 60 of those. I haven't counted that, but if we start with 60, that's a good point. So back in the workshop the next day, and I have separated the first 30, which we did 24 hours ago. And that's what we end up with. So we've got the soundboard now back on the flat. I'm just going to sand where the pallets go. Just make sure those old steady pins, which Mr. Chippy cut off neatly where they'd come away, the rusted ones, cut those off, and we'll just get that sanded lightly. And then we're going to put thick paper stroke card on that void in between where the pallets end and the back of the inside of the soundboard. So when I've seen these before, they've always been filled in with timber. But anyway, different makes, different ideas. And then hopefully the calico will turn up today. We won't fit that right until the end because I'll take the opportunity to vacuum out the soundboard. So, go from there. So I said I'd show you how we put these steady pins in. So I've put 24 in. So they need to be in an exact depth. The idea is that the pallet isn't going to jump the pin, and of course it needs to be held steady. So it's always returned to the same place. So what I've done, I've got a orderly cordless drill here. It'd be better off with a printed circuit board drill, but I haven't got a problem using this. I'm putting it all the way into the chuck because I've measured all this out and worked it out. I've made a little block of wood, and that's my end stop. So we've just got to go slightly forwards of where they were before, because they're nearly all snapped off. And then release the chuck. And that takes us to the exact depth that we want. Now the next one's going to catch. Probably. See the same again. You can see where the other one used to be. There's enough flexibility for that not to be permanently bent. Once we could get the pallets in these, we can manipulate them exactly where we want them. So I'll just do one more. I should have turned the background music system down, but there you go, I didn't do. There we go, and that's another one in. Okay, so next day, all the pallets have been dealt with. That's the second batch, there's the first batch, and the thin card at the back of the inside of the soundboard is now fitted and then leathered into the corner. Because if you have the slightest gap there, it's going to end up whimpering with it being inside to outside pressure. And then the first pallet is going to go down there. We just made sure it test fits. So we'll glue down those tails, and then the pallet tail guard will go in. And I'm screwing that in. Previously it was nailed in, which I think is a poor show. So that's going to get screwed in with 1.5" number 6 screws. So there we go, we'll get these pallets glued down. So the next thing I've done, just widen that out a little bit. I've just checked that the placement of these pallets, where the steady pins are, let them open. I've had to move 2 and just slightly bend a couple so they actually don't snag on them. Because of course they're in a different position with me having to do that, with the previous ones having broken off. So the other thing I've just done is I've just been inspecting that the pallets are properly down where I can. We've got one of those little closed circuit cameras. Is it a boroscope? I'll just show you what I've been looking at. I've set up a powerful light, doing about 2 or 3 at a time, and then we're looking at that screen. In actual fact, I can see a little bit of light on the right hand back there, which I think by the time the spring's on there, it will push it down. So when I open the pallet, you'll see the light floods in. There's just that little bit towards the right hand side. Let's look at the next one. Camera doesn't go down that one, or the next. And there's a sliver of leather there, so hopefully we'll be able to vacuum that out. Can't see any light there. So going down that, I'll just get that in shot. Let's see whether we can vacuum that out. Yes, it's gone. So, you know, that's the kind of meticulous detail I go to on these. Right, well, the pull downs haven't arrived from the Church Organ Builders wholesalers, so what we'll do next is to put the spring rail back in and the springs. So we've put the spring board back. The spring's going right at the end on this. I thought we were going to put the springs in after the springs retaining board, but it isn't like that on this organ. So put the bottom board in, which actually holds the spring board in place. I've refurbished the screws in the vise, filed them off, put the hacksaw through the slots. And I'm just going to show you something, just in case some of you don't know. So we always put screws in with grease. When you're tightening something up like this, you start in the middle. I might even have a screwdriver. So I'm going to put that down somewhere near. I've already started them, so they've just gone into their holes. Starting in the middle and we're radiating outwards. Because if you don't, you'll probably find it isn't really tight. I think when you're doing the cylinder head gasket on a motor car, you have to do the screws in a particular order. So now we'll tighten them up. We're also hoping that we can park the slots facing the wood grain. Can't always, but it's good practice. And at the end, well, we can do the same. So to another organ builder, only those screws would be visible on the inside. There we go, all the screws in. The next thing we're going to, I'll just clean those springs up, probably with a WD-40 rag, and we put them in with something called a spring catch. Now when I took them out, I just took the spring board out and just took them out. But when you're doing it, putting them back, and when you're working on an organ, then they all have to be done just so. Right, I'm putting springs in. I'm only doing 20 in a session. They're so mind-bogglingly frustrating that this is why I'm self-employed. No boss is going to say to me, get all those springs in, my lad, because it isn't going to happen. We're going to put 20 in, and here comes the 20th. I've already loaded 19 of them. Could I find my spring catch? No, I couldn't. This is a tool to enable me to put these springs in. So what I've done is to bend 2 bits of phosphor bronze wire. Did I say that right? Phosphor bronze wire, about 16 gauge, and I've put that in, drilled into a piece of doweling. They're soldered together. I've probably got about 4 of these. I must leave them on jobs or something. But what I've observed, and why the camera's on this angle, is that the next spring I'm about to put in isn't as strong as the rest. They're more or less all about the same kind of strength. Now, you don't want these so strong that the organ is very heavy to play, because these are the springs that you're fighting as you're also fighting air pressure. So I took these all out and put them in this piece of wood which I'd made, drilled these holes in so that we didn't get them wrong. So they're all going back where they came out, but I'm going to strengthen this one up a little bit. So if I look at that end one, That's about the strength they all are. And if I just make a little mark on there, that from there to there is the kind of average span. I'll put that back in my piece of wood. So I'll just move this viewfinder, just see whether I can see what you can see. So my mark's there, and that's a couple of inches short. So I'm going to strengthen this up a bit. It's just a matter of, I should be using round nose pliers, but you know, they're not handy, they're in another workshop. So we'll just strengthen this up. And there we are, that's exactly what we want. And the other thing I'm checking, some of these are bowed. And this, it's probably been strengthened up in the wrong place in the past. But you end up with it not going in the groove. That's the upper one. So normally we'd replace all the springs, but you know, it's my own organ, I don't really have to. So right, I think that's ready to put in. So we load it into the spring catch. So there we are, we've got a spring in the spring catch. I'll just move the camcorder. I wonder if any other organ builders ever shown this, or whether it's a silly trade secret. So you can see the springs which are in. That's the previous one to the one I'm going to do. That's the one prior to that. We've still got the pull downs to get, but they are put in later and they're still not here yet. So probably just move my light a little tiny bit. So I'm just going to thread that in. There's a groove on the pallet which holds the spring. It's kind of interesting to do this with a camcorder in a way. So that's the hole. So I can twist my tool. No, it's not easy to do with a camcorder in a way. And that's more or less in the top groove. Now, it's all skew width. So I'm just going to hopefully move it into position. I'm holding onto the pallet because I don't want to damage the pallet. So that's now in the groove. That's just about in the hole. That is in the hole. And at the top, I'll just pull the back of the spring. And that's clicked into position. See whether we can do another one. So this, just going to clean the spring with the cloth with some WD-40 on. Just going to check the strength is where it just needs to come up a fraction on its strength. That's where we want it. Drop it on the floor. So I'm going to load it into the spring catch once again and see whether I can do it a bit more slickly with the camcorder in the way. So try and get it down that groove. So you've got one of these for each note. So on this organ it's 56 notes, and this is when you're glad it's not 61 note. I've got it in the groove. There's the hole. Release, put the top one in, bash the camcorder with your head. It's not quite gone in that hole. One of these was really bent, and when I tried it like that, it was squeaking like nothing at all. It must have been squeaking for years. Alright, well, that's what I've got to do. I've done a third of them, so I'll carry on with those tomorrow and the next day, and then we should be about there. So what have we here? Well, we have the Swell rollerboard. So I'm waiting for parts to come through to finish the Swell soundboard off. I'm waiting for the calico, I'm waiting for 2 replacement springs, and I'm waiting for the 16 SWG pull downs. So I don't know why they're taking a couple of weeks, but that's how it is. So we're moving on to the rollerboard, which is going to be the next part. And of course I've run out of space. We're actually in the chapel, aren't we? We're not in the workshop, because the workshop has not got space because we've got other jobs underway. So the pasting table, which this is on, which I was just using to shove tools and things on, I'm having to just kind of use as another makeshift bench. So here we are. So what does this do? Well, first of all, this is a photograph before it came out. Let's see whether I can hold that somewhere near. So you can see it installed in the previous building. So that's the way up it goes. You can see the wind trunk that goes into the Swell soundboard. So the soundboard had been removed. And it's these, which are called trackers, these wooden rods, which, why organs are called tracker action when they're mechanical like this. So you have them, these going down ultimately to the keys. There is more mechanism between here and the keys, and which we will be overhauling and you will be seeing. So these go down to the main action, and these ones go up and activate those pull downs that we're waiting for. You can only see the odd one because most of them will have been removed. And these are all these trackers are going to have to be overhauled as well, because a lot of them are dodgy. So we're going to take all these rollers out. They're held in with pins. I bet the pins are iron, and so they'll need to come out and be replaced with phosphor bronze. So that's how it is. And without this being overhauled, you can end up with pins breaking, pins seizing, and so on. And what happens is that I'll just move across and hope that what I'm going to show you is in the camera. So if this tracker goes down to the keys, when it's pulled, that was a really fine example not to show you, the tracker which is on there will operate the pull down. So this gives lateral movement of the action. Because you couldn't have all the notes, if you imagine how narrow the keys are for the 56 notes, just under 5 octaves, you couldn't have all the pipes perfectly aligned with the keyboard. And so this adds width to the action. This organ is also set up so that the biggest pipes, are they on the middle on this organ? I think they are. So all that's arranged in different sides, the C side and the C sharp side. So let's see if there's one where they are attached on the other end. We usually try and take as many trackers off as possible. That's a short one. So we've got a broken tracker there and a not so broken tracker at that end. I can't say I've seen them with wires both end. But there you are. I've only seen about 200 organs. So I'm going to start dismantling that, and then we're going to, I've had an executive decision yesterday. We're going to put out a video every Friday. So regardless of where we are with this job, we will put out a video every Friday, and it'll contain things we've done and talk on what we are doing. So an hour later, I've got all the remains of the trackers out. I don't know whether they've all got to be totally remade. Well, I've plonked them on top of the soundboard whilst that's waiting for parts. These are probably going to get done in the next 2 days. Now let's see whether we can take any of these rollers out. And I'll zoom in. So we need to take every one of these rollers out, clean the backing board, and no doubt repin these rollers. So I need a pair of pliers. Well, usually I needed a pair of pliers. what we should be able to do is to pull on the pliers and move the roller, unless it's all seized. It's all seized, isn't it? No, not good at all. I mean, the other plan is to try and unscrew the rollers. But they've all got to come out because they are stiff. And that's going to make the action heavier than it need be. Let's see whether I can get one out off camera. So I actually unscrewed the roller stud from one end, which is not the way it's done. So we've got this roller out. This is the top one. Okay, so we're going to leave this part now, and I think we're going to do weekly updates on a Friday. It's just crept into Saturday because of other commitments. So you'll see I've taken all the rollers out from this left hand, or what we call the base end, and all the roller studs. Turns out they don't have removable pins. It's kind of part of the assembly. We've got a missing roller just over there. Third one, is it down? Now, seeing as this organ came complete, presumably we've got it somewhere, but it's not the end of the world if we haven't, because we can always make replacements. So we've taken the studs out of the left-hand side. We're not going to take the studs out of this right-hand side. We'll just go back in there, as long as the bushings are okay. So what I mean is, because these mount between left and right-hand roller studs, the studs can stay in place for the right-hand one. So for the right-hand rollers, it'll be the left-hand studs which will stay in place, and I'll remove the right-hand ones to effect the cleaning and refurbishment of those rollers, because we are painting them all, which is quite a painstaking thing to do. What I've done with the rollers, we've brush painted them and I've put them outside. I've got a shed just outside and I've got them drying in a rather clever way. I'll show you. There they are, hanging by the roller arms to the roof of that shed. All in order. So that's one reason to do them in batches. Things are done in two sections on this organ. So the, shall we say, the base end of these ones, the treble ones you've just seen, still in situ. So we'll put these back and we'll take the other ones out and treat these in the same way. Now we're going to have to rebush nearly all the roller arms because the bushings have come out years ago, and so we don't rattle the trackers. So we'll be rebushing those. I made some bushing pliers some years ago. I'll show you how those work in the next video, no doubt. So thanks for watching this part. I think it's part 7, and so we're going to now do an update every Friday. Thanks for watching.